Hey, how are you doing, guys?
Good, thanks.
That's the first intro roll of the video that I just spent way too long doing. So I was laughing my head off. So hopefully people watching this equally enjoyed it.
It's the same music that I have in my head when I'm strolling down the street. So there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of like a theme tune for like a jolly old life. How are we doing, guys?
Yeah, it's a good bumbling walking song. Doing good.
Yeah.
How are you?
It's finally starting to get a little less wintry. I feel hopefully. We're coming out of winter. I don't know. The heating's still on everywhere. Whereabouts are you based, Mindy?
Well, I'm in St. Albans, and yes, as we're doing this live, we're coming out of winter, but my friends in the Southern Hemisphere, they're going to be entering their winter, sadly.
You're from the States, aren't you?
I am, and I also have a home in Argentina, so it's always the opposite there.
Yeah, you probably end up getting the flu if you go between the two too frequently. And Ross, you're in your office today by the looks of it with your wonderful backdrop of your rest boom disco.
In merry old London town, yes, I am indeed. St. Albans isn't that far from where I am, Mindy, but it's like, well, I'm in Canary Wharf, so it's a miserable grey where I am. I'm jealous of your little bit of green space.
Yeah, we've got some real natural light there.
We have, yeah.
So everyone watching this live or in the future, if you're live and you've got any questions, just ping them in the chat. In the future, you can just give one of us a shout on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, carrier pigeon, smoke signals, whatever you want. We're always happy to talk some more. We'll jump straight in, I think, if you guys are cool, and we can sort of chat away as we go. So for those of you who don't know Ross, give us a wee intro, and then and Mindy as well. Tell us who you guys are and why the heck I've managed to make you come on this.
I'm Ross Towndale. I'm the managing director at Type A Media, an SEO consultancy based in London. I've been in the industry for just over a decade, and it's literally the only thing I've ever done for a career. So very good at SEO, terrible at a pub quiz.
And Mindy, you don't work in SEO. You don't work in digital marketing, digital agency world, but you're here for a very good reason. So tell us all about you right now.
Well, we don't have 16 hours, but no, my strange accent is because I grew up in the States. So, we can get at that out of the way. I've been in the UK 31 years. I run a couple of companies, and I'm best known for a book coaching brand called The Book Midwife. And having helped 1,000 entrepreneurs with their books over 21 years, I realized it's not about books, it's about thought leadership. And so I started going down that road and created the Thoughtful Leader. That's my big passion.
And you've done a TEDx talk, haven't you?
I have.
I mean, I'm never going to get invited to an actual TEDx, TED Talk, anything like that, and I'd love to. So, and if anyone wants to, we'll share the links at the end. But Mindy's talk at the TEDx in, where was it you did that?
In Anglesey, in Holyhead.
It was really good, and it was I love how they put so much production quality into those events. It looks brilliant. So happy to share the link after this. So today, everyone, we're going to be talking about what a thought leader is and how that kind of works in the digital agency space. It's a word that I think gets overused and probably incorrectly, and that's why Mindy's here. And Ross and I are here to probably learn something that we thought we knew, and B, probably give a few perspectives from the side of hopefully I'm obviously a thought leader. Everyone knows exactly who I am somehow. But we'll jump straight in. So first and foremost, what WTF is a thought leader? I've got a thought in my head that there's just someone that kind of knows a lot. But and gets to speak about that a lot. But what would the Mindy version of a dictionary definition be?
Oh, well, so there's the dictionary definition, and then there's the Mindy definition. When I was researching this in 2008, I went online, and this is what I found. Somebody who is recognized by their peers and mentors for having the courage to share innovative ideas. And I thought something was wrong with that. And I started playing with that. And it's because you don't just need to be recognized by your peers and mentors. It's the market who decides. So by the way, my clients never are allowed to call themselves thought leaders. So I'll call you one, Chris, and you can call me one, and we'll call Ross one, but let's not call ourselves thought leaders.
I love that. That's so essentially someone who kind of has the courage to say what they understand and what they know, but in a from a professional point of view. Is that where we're coming at?
I would add to that. I mean, it usually these days to stand out has to be bold. It has to be opinionated, and it has to be disruptive in some way. It can't be same old. I'm sure Ross would agree.
So Ross is infamous in the industry for a video series a few years ago called The Canonical Chronicle. So I'd say that's arguably something that's a thought leadership piece there. Ross, what do you reckon?
It's interesting. The Canonical Chronicle was news, so you're really just parroting back what has just happened. But when you start flavoring it with opinion and getting people to actually have a bit more divergent thinking, I think that's when it really comes into its own, because I think with thought leadership, there is the status quo, but in order to get to the status quo, someone had to have some divergent thinking of the last status quo, and then we all agree that that is correct. And then so you constantly to kind of evolve your thinking around it. And in technology, that's actually incredibly easy, because by its very nature, it just evolves all the time. I think the tricky thing when it comes to doing this on a regular basis is to not fall into this trap of being caught in a news cycle and just being a news commentator and then badging yourself as thought leader. They're very different things, and it's usually grounded in some sort of philosophical direction, not just parroting the kind of the thing of the day.
And it's really easy to just do that, though, isn't it? From I guess not just from a laziness point of view, but not necessarily knowing how to do it, but kind of wanting to have some of the benefits and I don't know what your thoughts are, guys, but I see an awful lot of people in the digital space specifically, because that's where we live and breathe most of the time, who don't actually have anything to say, but say it with a lot of confidence. Or more recently, I've seen things where you can definitely see that they've been using an AI tool to create the content that is their thought leadership content. What isn't a thought leader?
Okay, so I liked what Ross said about not just parroting what's going on, saying something new. The word I like is disruptive. But a lot of people just have shock value. So some celebrities, for example, that who they are, they get your attention. They have lots of followers, but they're not really saying anything important. So I have a good bash at celebrities whenever I get the chance. And the other thing is, when you are trying so hard to say something new, you can go too far. You get these people who are just contrarian, like everything they hear, they're like, no, actually it's the opposite. And that's not thought leadership. That's just contrarianism or whatever.
You get a lot of the well, actuallys in the digital agency space. I personally like provoking that, and people who eventually mute me on Twitter know that that's the case. Ross, you've seen some of those sorts of things before as well, but you in an industry where things change all the time, but actually fundamentally things don't change a huge amount, it's probably quite hard to work out where to put yourself. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think staking a claim to a particular area is a bit of a mistake. So we see people niching down, which is not thought leadership. It's just another form of PR. And I think what a lot of people confuse. So you mentioned AI earlier. So anyone who's currently pushing out things about ChatGPT, not really thought leaders, they're just PR people, because what they're doing is they're following an editorial calendar and a news agenda. And that's one real fundamental difference, is you kind of walk to the beat of your own drum and you think about first principles quite a lot. So in the world of search, yes, it doesn't really change a lot, but the way in which we interact with a first principle concept does change based on how the environment moves around you. And that's something that a thought leader understands deeply. If you think of there's a lovely Bruce Lee quote around, he's not scared of the man that knows 1,000 kicks, but he's scared of the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times. That's very true in this case, because you have to be very familiar with the fundamentals that kind of move around your topic in order to really like intellectually spar with it, because without knowing those deep fundamentals, it's very hard to question. It's all about questioning status quo, and it's very hard to look at them objectively if you're constantly on this editorial cycle of the new thing that we want to talk about.
A perfectly timed question actually come up from Adil. But isn't that the nature of social platforms? If you wait too long, you'll be on mute for a long time. Potentially, yeah, I definitely am. What are your thoughts between balancing authenticity and the algorithm? Because you do have to balance that quite a lot. If you know how to be seen, you've also got to be seen, I guess.
Are you asking Ross or?
No, you go first. You go first, Mindy. We're all going to talk over the top of each other at some point.
Okay, I'm always polite, you know that.
Yes.
And funny enough, that is one of the attributes of a real thought leader, not politeness so much as respect. And I think that's how the market decides. So, like I said, nobody should be calling himself or herself a thought leader. And the market decides, because you can't just say, I'm doing thought leadership, or I've written a thought leadership piece. It's the clients and your industry who need to pick up on that and call you one. So if you are engaging in some kind of conversation, so to answer Adil's question, you can be authentic. And in fact, I like what Ross is saying, because it's like Gladwell's 10,000 hours, which is an arbitrary figure. But if you have some depth, you actually can state something with confidence, with clarity, with substance. Substance is a big part of it, but also with respect. So there's no need to just be sparring for the sake of it, or just be contrarian for the sake of it, Chris and anybody else who likes, having a go. But if it's something you really believe, it comes through. And I think we get that. We get that from good speakers and people who are writing authentically.
Yeah. And what do you think, Ross, about kind of balancing that authenticity algorithm, being seen for the things you want to be seen for, but also having to do lots in order to be seen, if that makes sense? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, this question shows me that the Adil hasn't actually pushed out a lot of his own stuff. And the reason for that is the algorithm usually favors things like engagement metrics. And people don't engage with people who are not authentic. And the reason they don't do that is because if you're not authentic, you're not enthusiastic. And it's like, we can really tell if something's wrong as humans. So we've got, there's a lovely design thing that says that like the best design is invisible. You don't realize it's bad design until you can really see it. And it's the same with, thought leadership, content production, all of that sort of stuff. The question is poorly phrased in that chasing an algorithm and being authentic, as you're being authentic, it increases your engagement. And I know that sounds very woo-woo, right? So we come from the world of like hard numbers, AdWords, money in, money out, that sort of thing. And there is definitely a technical part of nailing the algorithm, but that comes from the way in which you publish things. It doesn't come from the creative you're producing. So separate those two things in your head. And it tends to work a little bit better.
Can I add to that? Because Chris and I were skiing together, not together. He's much better than I am and he snowboards. But we were away in the Alps in January. And I didn't post that week very much. When I posted all the pictures of the ski trip, I got like 500 to 800% more engagement. I got all these people really latching onto that, and all the likes and even shares. I'm like, why are they sharing my ski photos? Maybe it's someone with Chris making a funny face. But the fun thing about it was I then started getting loads of engagement on all my stuff. And I actually posted something on LinkedIn saying, oh, this strange thing happened. I got all this engagement on my ski photos. Maybe I should only post ski photos. And that created another whole discussion. But it's not about the ski photos. It's about being personal. It's about sharing of yourself. And I think being personal is a big part.
I saw someone do that wrong recently, where they did a very salesy post on LinkedIn and then a picture of a dog, and it wasn't even their dog. It was like from Unsplash or something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. You're hoping someone presses the like button because of the dog, but doesn't read the content, or you want to, how's this working? So kind of move along in the same sort of direction that we're talking. I think I know what your answer is going to be to this, Mindy, but can everyone be a thought leader kind of at the same time? So, if you're in a room full of very well versed, very well, very knowledgeable people about a specific subject, obviously none of them calling themselves a thought leader, would it, if they were all to line up and point to the person to their left or their right, would they say that's a thought leader, thought leader, thought leader? And if everyone is one in that situation, does it have the same meaning?
I think it does still have meaning when used properly. And like I say, more or less objective lists, if there is such a thing, people who, have metrics and reasons. I mean, I created a whole methodology to measure thought leadership because I thought it was important. And it's not just, oh, he's one, she's one, he's blah, blah, blah. You've got something to back it up. I also believe in nano niching, and it's even more specific than micro niching. And I think that if you have, I don't know, 1 million different nano niches, then you could have 1 million different thought leaders, one per niche. But you also don't only have to have one, because think about the people we follow online, and they may be very similar, but you follow them for different reasons. I'm not going to start quoting, well, I will. I find motivational stuff, Jay Shetty, for example, and Gary Vee, very different personalities, very different use of language. And yet, they both kind of are trying to inspire people. You'll find multiple people, but with a different angle. I don't know what you guys think.
What do you reckon, Ross? Because we go to a lot of conferences like that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the framing. I think it's very fluid. So if we think of like a thought leader being like the one that at the front that like leads a lot of other people's thinking, semantically by definition, not possible for everyone to be one in the same industry, because that's just people talking in a room, right? And also what it means to be the leader or to be the best changes over time. When we look at things academically versus practically as well, we're looking at completely different definitions. I like your thing about nano niches. One thing I would say to that is, on the academically I like it, practically I struggle with it. I think the reason being is, on an audience side, there's a level of consumption fatigue. However, I suppose if you've got nano niches, I suppose the audiences are different for everyone. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's always a market is one of the phrases we say at my company. People are like, oh, is there a big enough market? Let me do some research. And I just say, chill out. There's always a market. It's a question of getting so niched and so specific with your topic that, the people will find you. And also, we all know a lot of people who've made good money from 100 clients. So you don't need millions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this kind of follows on quite neatly, because I've asked you this already, so I kind of know what you're going to say. But I really, I think that there's you talk a lot in your coaching and training side of life around thoughtful leadership. what is it? Is it the same as thought leadership? What are the differences? What does it mean?
Okay, so yes, thank you very much. Is my baby, the thoughtful leader?
Plug.
Yes, I
Everyone buy the
know.
book.
Well, I happen to have one here that I'm giving to someone later on. There's a phrase that I really like, which is thoughtful leadership is thought leadership with more thought put into it, which sounds kind of funny, but there's a lot of noise that's called thought leadership that I think people haven't thought through. And they, why they put it out there without thinking it through is beyond me. So here at the Thoughtful Leader, we just say, well, it's like Thought Leadership 2.0. It's the next level. And people smile, but they know what we're talking about because, when you do have a word that begins to lose its meaning because people are throwing it around and not using it properly, and just using it for everything and calling themselves thought leaders, something needs to be done. So we've raised the bar. We've changed the conversation.
What are your thoughts with that in mind there, Ross?
Yeah, I think that it's very business dependent. So in agency land, I think it's very dangerous to conflate thought leadership and thoughtful leadership, because with agencies it is a formula business with a set amount of parameters that you need to act on from a technical point of view, and it's dangerous to stray away from that too much with esoteric, over the top, new, innovative leadership styles. However, you do still need to carve out some space to allow innovative leadership within the company. So with everything, it's really striking a balance. But when it comes to leadership in the world of agency, I would actually say being closer to standard rather than closer to thought leadership is important there, because consistency, just due to the nature of the type of business, is very important. Now, if you're in a high-tech startup, perhaps that would slightly change. So I think it's take the structural part of the running a business and just seal that off into like standardized leadership, but save space for innovating that's away from core business that will eventually filter through the company.
May I?
Yeah, go. Yeah, I'm just listen. I'm take it all in. It feels like like I said, I asked you this before, and you gave me an answer before, Mindy, and I've heard your response. And now Ross is on top. There's an additional dimension there. So I'm waiting to hear more.
I know. Well, that's why I wanted to continue the conversation at least for a few minutes, because I meet so many agency owners when I am out networking and online. So many, not just owners, but people who represent the agency. And I'm afraid that they all start to look and sound and smell the same to me. And they all say the same things. And they all talk about, the conversion and the ratios and the SEO and the this and that and whatever. And it's not really about that. And it might sound fluffy and esoteric, and I apologize, because what I didn't explain is we're actually talking about the substance of the message and the person who's delivering that. The purpose of having multiple thought leaders, or ideally thoughtful, it doesn't mean, thoughtful. It means thought leadership 2.0, having people in the agency who are out there credibly saying something important that makes heads turn. That can differentiate the agency from another one or 5 or 10 or, I meet a lot. I mean, maybe each one is able to differentiate itself, better than I'm explaining. But I just think that most business people could do with a bit of thought into their thought leadership.
Do you think, much like the typical leadership principles, management principles, all of the core skills that people really need to run a business, do you think that do you think some people are just naturally good at it? Do you think everyone would benefit from training? Not that we're trying to sell training, but by the training, there's a link at the bottom. But is it something that is better learned, or are there some people who are just like complete naturals at it?
I'll just give you my quick opinion, which is some people do tend to embrace this and go for it in terms of putting their ideas and opinions across and doing it credibly, doing it boldly, and with respect. So they get the balance right. They're engaging. People trust them. There's that authenticity that our viewer was asking about. Other people need to understand how to develop that, how to develop their ideas, how to work with them, and that's where I play. I don't play in any other area of leadership. Only development of ideas, discovering and developing the thought leaders, but also helping them discover, develop, and disseminate their, we'll call it content, but usually we don't use that word. Ross?
So I'm itching to know now. You held up your book a second ago, and I kind of want to know a little bit about that, because I've just bookmarked it on Amazon.
Okay. And I want to hear Ross's
oh yes, please. Yeah.
about the individual. No, it's okay. Let me just answer about the book, because the book is, first of all, I work with books, and I have to always have the latest flagship book to represent my stuff. So this is my latest flagship book. It's not my latest book. The point about the book is teaching people to be thoughtful in both senses of the word. So yes, there's the thoughtful, considerate. There's also thinking through your ideas in a methodical way, which is the skill set that we've developed here. And we've got this methodology for people who are at risk of putting out bland, boring content because they don't know any better. So this is what we've been doing, on the book side with all these hundreds of clients. So the point about it is you have to care enough, you have to be thoughtful enough to put the time in, don't you? In order to even put the extra time and effort in to developing better, more hard-hitting, more exciting, more disruptive content, you have to care enough to do it. If you don't care, just tell the AI to produce it. That's
I mean, it can be used for other things rather than that, but I do think a lot of people are using it for that in a minute. So Ross, do you think thoughtful leaders and thought leaders are born or they're made?
I don't think they're born, and I think if leaders are born, it comes from some pretty painful adversity that they've been kind of forced to figure out over time. I think any sort of leadership position requires a level of coaching, and that's not a plug for the WMG Centre, although I do use coaches.
But there's coaching available. Buy the coaching. Bye.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is because being able to someone to objectively hold a mirror to you is very important in your day to day. In terms of individual leaders, like the way in which that's looked at, psychologically, it all really ends back with psychology. The individual's personality type, their attachment style is actually a big one. Because if you're dealing with people on a consistent basis, the way in which you interpret the way people communicate with you is a fundamental, like the lens in which you consume information will fundamentally dictate how you lead. And also how you then push out information will dictate how you present yourself as a thought leader, if at all. And I imagine that's one of the kind of interesting things to kind of really break down someone's personality and understand where their authenticity actually lies, and look at how that can then be extrapolated, digitized, then pushed out to the internet. I imagine that's a big part of the work that Mindy does and what goes into it.
This is perfect timing as I move through. A question's come through on Twitter from I didn't see who it was. Joe had to copy and paste this from a tweet, so forgive me. What would be my first steps in trying to become a thought leader? Is it training or something else? And I'm guessing that Joe's in or works at or is the leader of an agency, so it kind of ties nice and neatly into this segment here. So. What would you say, Mindy? What would you do first? Because if Joe is indeed in a digital agency, he or she or they are seeing a lot of this going on, and they're kind of like, well, I think I've got something to say. Where do you go first?
So the very first step 0, as it were, is seriously deciding how important it is. Do you have the right intention to do it? Because jumping on a bandwagon, it's dangerous. You can fall off. And what I would say is if you make that decision and you have the reasons for that, I don't care what they are. I don't care if it's ego driven, I want to be seen as a thought leader and, have millions of followers. That's fine. Or if it's more of an altruistic, I want to leave a legacy, I want to give back to the next generation. We get all this sort of stuff coming through in our agency. And I don't want to judge anybody. That's the first thing. Then I think that, you really have to look inside and say, am I willing to do the extra work? Because it's not for the faint-hearted to really dive deep and to pull out your brilliance, if you want to call it that. It takes effort. Like, Ross was saying about somebody's been through stuff. What we tend to do with some clients who are willing to kind of go the extra mile is unpick and unpack stuff that they have been through and find a way for them to share it that builds credibility and doesn't hurt their reputation. So there's so many aspects to it. So it's having the courage to do it, having the willingness, understanding it's going to take extra time and effort, caring enough to do it.
Yeah.
And then, yes, there's training, there's coaching that, but to do it properly and to have that integrity, not to put out a piece of, something that's not the right quality.
And Ross, you are in a digital agency, you run a digital agency. At some point in the past, in building your own kind of thought leadership in the sector, lots of people know you and respect your opinion in the industry. So where did you go first? What did you do? What was yours? What did you have a step zero? Was there an approach?
That's a really good question. I mean, the no is the answer, and I wish I could come to you with a beautifully drawn out schematic of this is exactly how I thought, and I have all this wonderful thought process behind it. But ultimately, no. I think one of the things that stops people is this extreme inertia about I love step 0 instead of step 1. That's great. But they have this extreme inertia about starting because there's too many what if this, what if that questions that come up. And now you could ask yourself these questions till the end of time, or you could put something out and see what happens. And 9 times out of 10, the answer is nothing, because you have to consistently do it and build. So publishing is one thing, right? That's like building a muscle. You just need to do that consistently over time. What you put in the thing that you publish is the thing that will eventually create some level of differentiation. I'm in two minds about saying that you need to be a subject matter expert in order to be a true thought leader. I think it's important, but also there will always be someone smarter and greater than you. The people we respect in the public eye about physics are not working in CERN, like splitting particles and atoms and things like that. Those are different people.
Brian Cox is. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, so we've got one. So, but the people who are great communicators. Brian Cox started. Do you know how he started his career?
Was it band musician?
Yeah, a musician, right? So like a great communicator on a human level and someone who's incredibly authentic. And I think that's a big part of it. So start and it builds the communication muscle up quite a bit, because then you start realizing that this is actually quite straightforward and it's not scary, but it's hard and requires effort. And I think that allows you to build a bit of a muscle. Whether or not you can then be seen by your peers as a thought leader is a completely different subject altogether. I think that takes a lot of hard work and expertise. But in terms of getting going and getting started, I think the answer is just do something now and put it out, and then decide based on the feedback you get from the real world.
And so go on, Mindy. You got something to say whilst I'm.
I want to say
along.
Yes, and I want to be really inclusive and say yes, and I mean it. That is absolutely a good way, and people really shouldn't sit on the sidelines and wait. And our viewer before was talking about waiting for the time and missing the boat and all that. However, I think with a process of some kind, some coaching and some support in this area, people can get a better ROI on their content and get that result sooner. And well, not I think, I know, because we've worked with people who, really weren't doing anything. And then in a very short time, they're making a bigger impact. They're getting that feedback. And you're absolutely right, Ross. The one thing that we can't control is how it's going to be received. So, we do all this work, all this planning, all this strategy, and, produce great stuff and then let it fly. And like I said before, the market decides, we cannot control how it lands.
Just to add on to that, so I completely agree with that. Like proper strategy will, you'll reap the rewards and there'll be higher ROI at the end of it. It must be the miserable Scotsman in me. When my team get given a process, they get given the hard manual way. When we're onboarding people, they get the hard manual way first, and then they slowly get the thoughtful strategy way, and then so they can eventually understand how it got to be automated and things like that. Now, if you're running business, that's a horrific way to run business because time is money and you need to just get a good strategy and get to market with it. It really depends on the person. I think the person, as it Joe that asked the question, Chris, I can inference that they were in a slightly more junior position in life. I think the advice for them is just to start. But for actual business people who are looking to capitalize on this, I think surround yourself with good people and actually putting your money to work a little bit and getting the right people in to help with that strategy would make a ton of sense.
So besides all of the nice things like, the respect that you might get from being seen as a thought leader by your peers and things like that, what can it actually do? How can it work for you if you're building a business? What give us a couple of examples, Ross. What's thought leadership's or value been to Type A?
I mean, it can give you a massive complex. So when I first started, some of the things that people were saying about me was around, I sound like Mrs. Doubtfire and things of that nature. So there's a little bit of that where you need to develop some thick skin around. And because SEO is such a contentious topic, there's a lot of people that want to battle you on some of your ideas. But I actually see that as a good thing, not a bad thing. In terms of hard ROI, we've been able to build a 7-figure agency off the back of it. Hilariously, although we're a SEO company, all of our leads come from our social media thought leadership pieces. Read into that how you will. So it's been ROI positive for us. It'd be hard to put a number on it, and it'd be hard to really say this was the absolute tipping point. But to give you an example, when the pandemic hit, I got terribly depressed, and because I was the person pushing out a lot of this stuff, it stopped for our agency for 2 years. However, we created such a flywheel that our leads didn't stop. So I think that's probably testament to the previous 4 or 5 years of doing this stuff. And you'd be amazed that everything that you put out there, it echoes and it resonates, and it keeps going and going and going. So ROI wise, yeah, I think it's been pretty ROI positive agency side.
And what do you reckon, Mindy? What are the kind of aside from hopefully what the obvious are, what are some of the other core benefits that you kind of see from the people that you spend time with?
Absolutely. So definitely financial, definitely business. The leaders and the business owners I've worked with have been able to charge higher fees. They get invited to speak more often and for higher fees. They get invited to really interesting opportunities, joint venture, startups, investments, so all kinds of things. So they become known, they become seen and trusted and all that stuff. But there is that other side, and I feel I have to bring it up again, which is the feeling of giving back, leaving a legacy, making your mark, whatever you want to call it. A lot of us who have started businesses, and I've started 6 in my short lifetime, we just want to know that we're doing something good. And while you're in the business, head down, everybody says, work on the business, not in the, yeah, very nice. But you very rarely get to step back and work on the business and take a look at that bird's eye view and see the impact that you're having. And I know that's not a tangible, measurable ROI. But that's what I hear more often than not from every single client, is they feel they're making more of a difference. They're getting that feedback and they feel valued and that their work is valuable.
It's awesome. So last kind of sort of wrapping up, final thoughts. What would you each sort of offer as a final thought to any of these agency leaders that are listening right now? What's your one bit of advice, Mindy? What would you leave them with?
One piece of advice.
Only one. You're only allowed one.
Okay. So what occurs to me right now is, everybody is in this conditioned behavior of, the media and what's happening in the news and the economy and all this, to step away and figure out what kind of leader you want to be, what kind of business, what kind of agency you really want to run, and consider that's one of our favorite words here. Consider what you could do to create this thought leadership profile for yourself, but also, the legacy. It does inspire your team. It goes beyond. It has the ripple effect on your clients and the rest of the industry. So that's what's up for grabs. But to go someplace, have the time and space to reflect on that and ask yourself if you're willing to go that extra mile and be thoughtful in that sense, and then create the thought leadership that you can create, only you can create.
Yep. Wonderful final thought from Mindy. Ross, what's yours?
I'm going to bring down the tone and potentially say something that may be construed as slightly distasteful, in that I would say to people, really think about speed and aggression. And what I mean by that is there is so much noise and so little signal that as you put things out there, especially if you're a little nervous of it, if it's your first time or you're starting to get into it, you may think that, oh God, everyone is seeing, oh God, I'm spamming these people. People are going to be seeing this and hating it and thinking I'm this, that, and the other. They're not. They're barely seeing anything you do. So I would really go hard and fast with a lot of the publishing side and the technical side. However, that does not mean that you create something that is like automated and rubbish. You have to really think of a really solid strategy where the core thing that you're talking about and going over is good on its own without social media. And social media is just an engine to drive traffic. That's all that is. Start with making the good thing, but once the good thing is made, just completely over-index on speed and aggression.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys for obvious reasons, hence why you're both on here. Otherwise, it would be a difficult conversation. Thanks very much, Ross. Thanks, Mindy. For those of you who are kind of thinking, what the heck next? I kind of get my step zero. I've done step zero. I know what we need to do. If you're thinking about thought leadership from your own perspective as an agency leader, then obviously speak to Mindy, speak to the OMG Centre, have a chat, and we'll be pointing in the right direction. But one thing that we didn't touch on necessarily is the power of sort of creating that mindset in teams as much as just the leader of the business. And I think that having the right training, the right skill set around thought leadership in a team, those people become the choir voice for your agency. They'll also become mini niche thought leaders in a micro niche, which is their individual skill set in that agency and things like that. And they'll want to go and speak at events or be on podcasts, webinars, all those sorts of things. So if that's something that you're interested in any way, then obviously give us a shout. Our next webinar is this Thursday. And I promise, even though it's about insurance, it won't be boring. Michael and Omar really know their stuff. And we've got a few I'm going to say interesting horror stories relating to insurance and agencies that didn't believe that it was as important as it as it should be. I think everyone in this room knows get the right insurance, but these guys know exactly the right way to navigate that, and they're going to talk us through that on Thursday. You can just join. You can register your interest on omg.centre/webinars, but in the meantime, have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in the world, summer or winter, depending on where you are in the world. And thanks very much for joining us, you guys.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.